Speaking of children, is it true that when you were 21 years old, you delivered a baby on the tube? Hamzah, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So you have a very unique origin story to your business, right? I heard that the dog filter on the app Snapchat inspired the creation of your company. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and the journey building the business?
Sure. I suppose, yeah, Snapchat can't take all the credit. I was a student so I studied medicine and I focused on neuroscience. So I studied medicine at UCL and I focused on neuroscience at Imperial. I was in a lecture during the neuroscience sort of BSc that I was doing, and it was one of those big lecture halls at Imperial where you've got this like little prof in the front with a bow tie. It's like in medicine that's almost like the neurologist stereotype, and I was like quite young and we were learning about how to diagnose certain conditions, and one of the sort of I don't know if you've ever been like hit in the back of the head or gone to A&E or just
not yet,
concussed. Okay, not yet. Hopefully never. But sometimes if someone has a head injury, or sometimes if there's a stroke or some sort of neurodegeneration, there's a test you can do called the cranial nerve test, which is basically where you have like 12 cranial nerves in your face that come out of your brainstem, and these innervate certain parts, and you can test them doing certain actions and tests. Okay. It's quite difficult to do, and that is what the professor at the front of the class was really emphasizing, and it takes years of experience. And I was like, oh bloody hell, like why have I selected this? This is really tough. I will slowly doze off in my seat and push this down the road. And whilst I was doing that, sort of subconsciously, I was like a good mature medical student. I was playing on my phone and Snapchatting my mates, and I saw the dog filter as and I utilized the dog filter. Well, I should explain basically that there's certain part of that cranial nerve test, you basically can assess eye movement. And I don't when they do this, for your listeners, it's basically like when you wave your hand around in front of the individual. And so I had that in the back of my head, and then I went on Snapchat and I was like, wow, why is Snapchat able to track my eye movement, but a room full of 300 medics allegedly might struggle with that? Sure. And that sort of triggered the point in my head that neurology and psychiatry, to a degree, could be potentially translated onto a phone. And that's maybe different to other specialties such as gastroenterology, where you need like maybe complex imaging, cardiology, where you might often need to examine the patient. But neurology and psychiatry and mental health is a lot of communication, it's asking the right questions, maybe some gross motor function. And I was like, phones are pretty cool these days. You can do a lot with that. Like, why not try digital the consultation process? And that was like my very naive hypothesis at the time. Fast forward like 3 years later, and Mindstep now can assess and triage the 10 most prevalent brain and mental health conditions. It's able to offer support for the low-risk individuals. It's able to refer onwards. To date, it's on our consumer product, it's seen around 250,000 individuals.
Wow.
Yeah,
cool.
There you go, that's it.
From Snapchat dog filter to 250,000 people being, helped and saved and assisted, through this technology. You've kind of gone through that journey, right? From an idea to execution to building something really cool, and still lots of scope for it to grow and expand. But you're many steps ahead of other people that just have this idea. What advice would you give to those people that want to go on that journey and build a startup? I
think what I don't really feel maybe that well placed to give advice, but what I think did help was like just naivety at the time, and I felt, I don't know enough neurology, I'm not that advanced in my medical career, I don't have that many publications. But actually that was weirdly a superpower, because I didn't know really what the constraints were around it. And I feel like often if you know a lot of the domain, expertise, and what's failed and tried before, just like you kind of have to be a bit mad to go against all of that insight, right? So I was so naive and not that great at medicine. So I really just was like, how hard can it be? And I think that's a really important mentality to have. I also think and now looking back, I didn't have any like real commercial ambitions or genuine like, I didn't even know what a Series A was. Yeah, sure. I was just like, this is really cool. I love the brain. I understand and I really care for patient needs. And I was seeing, like when I was starting my sort of clinical like placements in hospital, it was around COVID. So I was really seeing the devastating effects of the NHS. So I just thought this was a really interesting problem to solve. That was really cool. So I'd say like, lean into the naivety, really, really like just enjoy the problem and solving the problem, and also just appreciate that like your initial idea doesn't need to be perfect, and it can be embarrassing. That's so okay. Like Mindstep looked very poor, and I'm still kind of embarrassed sometimes about the branding and stuff. We have a very, very good product and branding team, but I think that's all okay. You just should plow on.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference between people that wait for everything to be perfect until it's launched and people that just release an MVP and then iterate and get it better and better over time. And the people that just get started and take action, 99% of the time, they're the people that win, as opposed to the ones that just live in this dream of one day releasing it perfect, but they're never actually doing anything about it.
Yeah, and like you get, like I got loads of chat from my mates, and I was like in the football, I was playing football as well, and they'd be like, why are you coming to the game? And I was like, well, I'm just tinkering away on your app. And they're like, what, your app? You think you're Steve Jobs? And I was like, nah, but I think it's cool. And then, they come around and it's supportive, and you just need to be, you just go if you enjoy it.
Yes, yeah. I loved the idea about naivety as well, because oftentimes you get these MBA type people who have a 27-step business plan before anything gets done, whereas in reality you just kind of need to just like do the first step. And
I literally could not write you a business plan now if I tried.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the journey building that through capital, because you've raised, I want to say more than 3 million, if Crunchbase is up to date.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that.
Okay, cool. So a lot of founders that I speak to, they struggle to raise investment, and they really have challenges when doing the pitch, when finding the right people, when getting that capital. What advice would you give to people that are looking to raise and then secure those funds that then they can use for growth?
Well, okay, this is a great question. Firstly, I really think be yourself. The VCs aren't silly. They'll smell you trying to be someone else or someone else's founder, from the get-go. In that same vein, you should at least you know your product and you know your market probably better than the VC does, sure. Right? So, and I think that should come through and that should be strong. So often I would sometimes get a VC go, why don't you do this thing, or why don't you integrate? Why don't you make an API or something like that? And I'd be like, okay, well maybe I'll just put that in the projections and in the roadmap just to satisfy them. And then I'd write the email and just be like, nah, I just don't believe in this. I just think you're wrong. I'm sorry. If you're going to pull the money because we disagree, so be it. But I just don't believe that's true. And I actually think that's actually a real strength. And I think VCs, at least the great ones, kind of respect that. And I had a lot better success raising capital when I was just sorry, you can have your perspective on the market, but this is what I believe is to be correct, and don't just falter under the pressure of needing to raise capital and runway and burn. Just stand for what you believe in. I think really be clear on your values. I'm very transparent to my board and my venture capitalists. As long as Mindstep's able to help people and the NHS, you'll have me around and we'll continue to be successful. If those two go away, I hear the guardrails, here's what I want to do, here's how I want to grow. And I think just being really transparent and knowing yourself, and it takes some time. I would say before you go out and raise, really understand what you're about and who you are, and have an identity for your company and what it stands for, and then people will be able to buy into it or not. Even if I feel like a VC would pick a company that they don't necessarily agree with every part of, but it's really clearly defined and they know the company and the founders know who they are, versus someone who maybe doesn't have that identity or that strong beliefs and values outlined yet, but it's more it's their thesis regurgitated back to them.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com.
If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
Sure. It almost sounds a bit cliche, but like a rocket uses 90% of its fuel just to get off the ground, and then it just kind of drifts through space. You know, a building, like 90% of the time it's built, it's getting the foundations right, and then it just kind of like goes up really, really quickly. Well, not really in the UK, we take forever to build, but it's the same thing with a company and the values and the principles and the beliefs. If you can set those foundations in place, it becomes so much easier to recruit, to know what product direction you're working towards, to get investment. But if you have a really weak foundation, then everything crumbles later on.
Yeah, I think like no one knows your business like you do. Yeah. Believe that, make that clear. They're allowed to disagree with you. Just because they disagree with you doesn't mean you won't necessarily get funding. I think that's a big lesson.
Cool. So you have a degree in neuroscience. What are your thoughts on Elon Musk's Neuralink?
I have been looking at it from afar, but I haven't done a lot of the paper reading and stuff as I would like to. I think implantable devices in the brain have actually been around before that. Yeah. So you have deep brain stimulators in Parkinson's disease. So it's an amazing treatment. Honestly, when I went to they do them at Queen Square at UCL. Yeah. I remember that placement on the ward really distinctively. I've never seen, they have a ward of all the patients who have just had a DBS implanted into them. Yeah. And I've never seen more tears of joy after a procedure. Like these individuals, Parkinson's is a very debilitating lifelong condition. Yeah. You're trembling, it really impedes you, and it becomes worse and worse, which I hear from patients is one of the most devastating parts, right? These deep brain stimulators, which they've managed to engineer, that sit in your brain and basically pulse frequencies to override the pathways that are going wrong, almost reduce the symptoms to none, and you can really live a fairly good life for a long period of time. So I think some of the critique on this is very weird, implant, it's happening. It's already and to great success for a lot of individuals. What I saw the little video of the patient moving their cursor around, and it was the joy in their face was similar to what I saw on the wards and stuff. I can't comment on whether it's safe and whether Mr. Musk is following all of the right protocols and FDA legislation, but I think we shouldn't be so resistant to it just because Elon Musk does some mainstream radical ideas sometimes. There's a lot of great neurologists that have thought about this for a long time, and I think it's not something we should just shun because Elon's doing it.
Sure. Would you get one?
Would I get one if I needed one? Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I think.
What about if it wasn't a case of you needing one because you had some kind of disability, but it was a case of it would give you an advantage? If you could just think, I appreciate it's not at this point yet, but when it's version 7 or 8, then you can think and then get the answer from Google, or you can, completely control all of your devices from your Alexa to your Xbox, to your phone, just by thinking, as opposed to somebody else who has to use a keyboard and a mouse, and then you'd be more competitive in the workforce and you'd have more access to information. You'd be like a human AI at that point. Yeah. So less of a case of you needing one, more of a case of you having an advantage over people that don't have one, evolution. Would you get one at that point?
I think every medical procedure is just and this is maybe the boring answer, it's just risk balance. It's just what are you willing to risk versus the benefit to you, and that's every patient's decision. I was having a very similar conversation about Ozempic, which is obviously very popular at the moment, and it was licensed for people with diabetes, and then it's licensed for people who are obese, and now you have people tending to use it who potentially don't need it. Yeah. And it's okay, you can lose a lot of weight, but what is the risk gain to you? Yeah. And it's hard to know.
Yeah, we don't know yet. There's no long-term studies on any of this stuff because it's all brand new.
Yeah, so I think where is it healthcare when you're not really caring for your health anymore? You're just enhancing your health. You know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's more cyberpunk that reality. It's an enhancement rather than a fix.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, it'd probably just be too expensive for me.
Sure.
But I wouldn't be afraid of the procedure. I don't think. Neurosurgeons are like, it's the bloody hardest training in the NHS.
Yeah.
Right? These people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's just always like risk benefit. Depends on your needs. But I think for people who have spinal injuries, people with Parkinson's, like, that stuff is game changing.
It will start out really expensive, obviously, like any technology, but then hopefully it will, like everything, come down in price. The challenge with the Neuralink type devices, will the people that have it have such an advantage that they'll get such a head start over everybody else that can't afford it, where the rich kind of become this superhero type class of people. Who knows, but it'll be interesting. One other kind of cutting edge form of technology is augmented reality. You have AR within your app with the balloon test. What are your thoughts on like AR, VR, the metaverse, I guess the future of tech in that world?
Okay, two very contrasting thoughts.
Yeah.
One is, so the positive one is I think VR will, if used in the right way, could be like amazingly diagnostic for a lot of things. So we do that in Mindstep by placing like things around an individual and looking at how they map and scan the room, and it's quite useful at basically detecting certain signs.
That's AR.
AR. And I think VR actually could probably do it even better, right? You could look at their gait, how they walk, certain neurological signs that have always been really hard to detect, or you need to do it in person, etc. So I think there's huge capacity on that front. I think there's huge capacity, and I'm sure, and I know of groups that are working on this in surgery. So just like ensuring plastics is more effective in terms of their incisions and marking, and God, like it's going to be like really empowering for surgery, I think. I think the slightly side that I'm maybe more concerned on is maybe the mental health side, especially around like metaverse. So we know like ADHD is increasing drastically. There's some studies now coming out about how children who have utilized iPads a lot during adolescence are struggling in school. People have anecdotal evidence, but now the studies are actually coming out around that as well. I feel like it can't be good, just not just like science aside, it just can't be good disconnecting yourself from reality for a child to be so overstimulated. And
the closeness, like having an iPad is one thing, but having, like we were told as kids, don't sit too close in front of the TV. Now the TV is here.
Yeah. I don't know have you tried the VR?
Yeah, I've tried everything. I was an OG with the Google Cardboard, then I had all of the Meta Quests, and just need the Vision Pro, and then I'm full metaverse. But I mean, I love it as a concept, but I do agree with you. There are so many potential downfalls when it comes to isolation and and mental health challenges it could bring. There's also a lot of pros, but it's such a new territory, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for like actual healthcare, I think it can be game changing. I just think as like a recreational tool, I think for kids it's like iPads, or like, not iPads, I sound like such a boomer when I say these kids, but just like VR could be it could contribute to the attention sort of deficit that we see at the moment.
It probably will. Let me ask you about AI, kind of like the trifecta of cutting edge technologies right there.
Yeah, we're going through them.
Yes, you use AI in your app to help analyze the data and provide insights and recommendations and everything. So what are your thoughts on the future of artificial intelligence?
So maybe within healthcare, I think this has to be done like really, I think there's a danger of like what always kind of happens with like a new technology is, at least within healthcare, we start wedging it everywhere. We start wedging it in places where it doesn't really belong, and it's not even that helpful, right? And people just have these hypotheses that, generating a, summary for this patient using an LLM is what the radiologist wants.
When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a real concern at the moment, and maybe it's the natural process of how like innovation works. Like you kind of hammer everything. Some things are going to stick, and those things that stick are probably going to be the effective ones. It feels like everything is being hammered at the moment possible within like the whole patient journey. I think that there is like a concern around, so like obviously data is the fuel of AI, right? And we're all, at least the big models, are all using the same data and generating out the same data, and it's sort of converge. I don't know if you saw this study, which was basically, it looked, PubMed is, you know, where people publish papers. The word, I think it was the word delve. Okay. They did a graph of it, how many times it appears in publication titles. Okay. And then just like normal. And then in the last year and a half, it's like 4x'd. Okay. Because everyone's using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is learning off new PubMed papers, and it's just perpetuating. So you just have everyone delving into stuff, which loses the originality of medicine. So I think ChatGPT's already been called out on this and like certain aspects. Another issue with AI is that it's really good at the stuff where it has data on, but where it doesn't have data, it's completely useless. Yeah. I don't know if you saw, I saw it on Twitter where basically, you know, there's like this, you have two people, one of them saying the truth, one of them saying a lie. How do you figure out who's telling the lie, basically? It's kind of like a riddle. Okay. And it's quite well known. Sure. But someone just gave it the problem, you have two people telling the truth. How do you know who's telling the truth? Which is obviously a very simple problem. But because ChatGPT doesn't have that data set, and it has the data set of the other thing, it came up with this mad convoluted thing that wasn't really applicable. So I think AI, in summary, machine learning, I think, will be really useful in automating certain pathways. I think the NHS has a great deal of catching up to do in terms of digitalizing, but there are some really, really clever people now in the NHS working on it. So it could get there. But I also think, the real value will not be in the models, but it will be on the data and to address those two problems that I kind of highlighted, like the convergence and sort of the blind spots.
Sure. Do you think it will ever become self-aware, sentient? Nice, easy question for you.
I think I maybe have a controversial opinion on this. I think no. I know a lot more about neuroscience than I do about machine learning. Sure. So our brains work in very different ways to machine learning algorithms, at least from my understanding. Yeah. A lot of them are basically brute force calculations that are going on. So it's basically doing like many decision trees, and it's trying to predict using like models what the next step is based off prior data. Our brains don't work like that. We don't have enough battery, juice, GPU, whatever you want to call it, in our heads. Yeah. So our brains use much more nuanced, and some systems we don't even understand yet quite fully, to like have a consciousness, retrieve old memories, pull together complex movements. The way the systems in our brain interact with each other is completely different. So like sentience is quite a complex, process that I think, although on the surface AI at the moment can carry out similar things and better things than humans do, the underlying mechanics are still quite different. There are people with like computational neuroscience degrees who are very, very smart, and like DeepMind are one of the groups that are going to probably bring the two together and borrow from neuroscience about how to build better models. But I don't think we're very close yet, and I still think the brain is like mad different. But that's maybe because I don't know enough about machine learning, and maybe it is there yet.
I know nothing about it, so I'm
so you don't know where?
No, I'm asking just as a curious layperson. But I mean, the question really is, if you give a GPU and a computer enough power, can it replicate consciousness? Is consciousness uniquely biological? And I don't know the answer to
that's like a deep philosophy question. Can it replicate consciousness? I mean, like, if it's turned on, right? If it's turned on, maybe it's conscious.
But we'll never really truly know.
Yeah, does it have to feel things?
Probably not. I don't know if it'll feel emotion, but...
Yeah, I just think there is a huge difference. Like, I think there was a cool study on like how Face ID worked. So how it works, it uses like the network and it tracks images. Your brain also has like a region very specific just to recognizing people's faces, and that works very differently to the models that Face ID. It's just an example about how the process on the outside looks the same, but underneath the neurons, the neural networks on both sides, something very different is going on.
So you did an article with Sifted a few months ago on mental health and managing stress. What tips would you give to people who feel overwhelmed and want to reduce their stress levels?
So I think looking at, first of all, the cause of your stress is quite hard to identify sometimes, but it's really the best way of making progress with yourself. So that can be, is your stress maybe burnout? And then maybe the question is like burnout, I think everyone can to a degree relate to that feeling. We've done some really cool work at Mindstep to sort of try profile what burnout means, because you have some individuals who can just like work and work and work, right? And why is it that this founder who just works 24/7 never feels burnout, but this other one who maybe works half as much is really burnt out? And what we're sort of finding is that it's how it sort of aligns with your core values and your passion. So if the more those two things pull apart, your output and what you have to do, like let's say you're working a 9-to-5 job, but you absolutely despise and it doesn't resonate with what you're doing, you're going to get burnt out so much faster than. And this is in fact that's why founders can work so much, because they're just hugely passionate about what they do. That is really key. So I think firstly, taking a moment to like appreciate that stress happens to everyone, trying to reflect on like what the cause is and addressing it. We have a lot of data at Mindstep around this, but a lot of individuals feel uncertainty around certain things, and there's different thought experiments you can do with yourself, and we have those on Mindstep available if you'd want, but there's also like other resources online around how to control your thoughts around uncertainty. I think people need to recognize that that feeling you have of anxiety is actually something you've evolved, and it's really useful. Like back when we were cavemen, being uncertain whether that bush was rustling because of the wind or because of a lion was very useful. But nowadays we have so many stimuli around us and it's so overwhelming, and the threat isn't that great, but we still feel like there is a constant threat, and that's what causes...
Like notifications, I've turned all of mine off apart from a couple of select people on WhatsApp and phone calls, and it's so much less stressful than it pinging every 5 seconds because somebody's uploaded something onto TikTok, or I've got this email spam message that's come through, right? And the primal part of your brain is like, I've got to pay attention to this right now. It's made a sound. Is somebody coming to eat me? When in reality, it's Deliveroo, like offering me a discount.
Yeah, darn Deliveroo. What else is really important? I mean, there's, I think, so we recently launched like a relationship module on the app, basically because we sort of did this like piece of work where we're like, okay, we have these individuals who seem to be showing signs of anxiety, like what's the cause? Let's just like put 40 options out there and see what hits. And the number one cause of people's anxiety, at least in our user group, were relationship issues. And we dissected that, and actually then it becomes quite diverse, like some people are breaking up, some people are lonely, some people, but it was an interesting, like this human connection was actually a major driver.
I think it was 70% of people struggling from mental health and traced it back to relationships. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And then we basically felt it was quite weird because like I had been taught like you could see someone in general practice or in your primary care setting, right? And if they came in with anxiety and it was quite severe, you would be probably putting them down like an SSRI, like sertraline pathway potentially, or you'd be putting them through CBT and therapy, which doesn't necessarily tackle that issue around like building human connection and social isolation, right? We don't really have an NHS pathway and that's not the fault of the NHS or doctors, it's just how society has quickly evolved and this mental health game versus our current healthcare understanding, right? So we thought it was really important to put that out there, and it's actually become like one of the most used modules.
Yeah. The number one thing that's helped me with, I don't really feel anxious, but if I ever do, I have a 1-year-old, and like that's like the best way of reducing anxiety, just like playing with a kid, right?
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's like there's no way of feeling anxious when you're playing with your kid. Speaking of children, is it true that when you were 21 years old, you delivered a baby on the tube?
I wouldn't say delivered. Delivered is very generous. I think the mum delivered the baby.
Okay, well, you helped deliver the baby. Yeah, it's definitely the wrong term, isn't it?
I was, just like in my early years of medicine, and I saw someone in need.
So how did you know she was like full, like giving birth to the baby on the tube?
Yeah, basically I was on the tube stop. I was like headphones in and I heard two people screaming, and I was like, ooh, that's probably not good. It's like 2 p.m, like that's a bit odd. So I went round sort of the corner, and this poor mum was in a lot of distress, and her sister was there in equal amount of distress, and there was sort of like, you know, not to get too graphic, but like there was signs of birth present, and I was just like, I was just like, I don't, you know, first thing you do in medicine, they teach you, call for help. Call for help. No, nothing there. I was like, well, it's happening. I'm like,
when you said nothing there, because on the underground you couldn't get
I was on
signal.
the underground, no signal, turned around. It was at Warren Street, so there is actually, we're just walking out the big hospital called UCH there, and I was like, all the doctors are overworked, no one's here. And so I tried to call for help. I tried, I was just like, I'm just going to calm this mum down. And I happened to be on something called, basically you can select modules sometimes in medicine.
Yeah.
And I happened to be on like neonatal medicine. So I knew the absolute basics of kind of what to do. But yeah, fortunately it all panned out well. I just sort of caught the baby, to be honest, and then I wrapped it in a jumper, and I was just like, bloody hell, hope the paramedics arrive fast.
That's cool.
But yeah, honestly, a lot of medicine is just showing up, being there for the person, wrapping them in a blanket, and you can get quite far.
Did she name the baby Hamzah?
No, but I did suggest Warren.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. It's cool. I don't know how I can top that, so we'll leave it there. But
yeah, the baby's all good. It was quite the surreal experience. Yes. But
I can only imagine. I wouldn't know what to do in that situation, but it sounds like you handled it pretty well.
Honestly, just show up for people, be kind, be compassionate, and you can actually get quite far in medicine.
Yeah. For people that have found this interesting, they want to find out more about your platform, where do they go? What should they download?
They can download Mindstep on the App Store, and they can also follow us on socials at Let's Mindstep. We're quite active on LinkedIn, I suppose. That's probably, or Instagram. I think that's probably the second most active. Give it a download. The first assessment's for free, so just give us feedback. We're always trying to improve our product.
And what about your social? Would LinkedIn be the best?
I suppose. Focus on the company. I think that's the company. Downloading the product and giving us feedback is more than enough help. Cheers. Thank you so much, Alfie.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., etc. And I'll see you in the next episode.